The Island Wars, Part 2. Now, despite the fact that Horusha failed against Ilignite and Ingale, they still wanted to expand their territory because this would be beneficial for taking over the island. Of course it would be. But they still were facing problems. But we're going to go ahead and go talk about that later. In the meantime, Fintoff was getting sieged by Plaint, and Ilignite was eventually going to help. Yet, Plaint was realizing that it was going a little harder than they thought. They failed in the north, and in the north, their campaign was starting to get pushed back. Not to mention that Horus had just declared war on Ilignite, so Ilignite had to draw its troops over to help defend its territory. As Horusha got into defensive positions in the north, a failed attack on Fintoff happened because while Plaint attempted to flank Fintoff, they ended up getting flanked themselves by the army behind them. So that was also a fail. Meanwhile, down south, Ilignite also had its troops ready, and Horusha started moving north, and they entered Plaint territory. Now, instead of just completely taking Plaint, they still wanted to focus on Ilignite. And despite the fact they think they were smart, they actually left a gap open, which Ilignite could use to flank them. And they were going to use that to its fullest extent. Using this, they managed to go through Plaint and flank Horusha hard. And now with the reserves arriving in even bigger numbers, they were getting wrecked. The armies in the north had to surrender, and Horusha suddenly was now surrounded. There was a lot of fighting, which completely destroyed the army in the middle, and while some soldiers managed to escape from the other army, it was still a terrible loss of life. With that done, Ilignite sent some troops back to help defend the mainland, as it prepared to send its troops north, as the rest were prepared to send northward to help in the Fintoff campaign, which absolutely destroyed them. And now that they had Orfil, they could finally get Fintoff out of the war. Then they split the island between themselves, as this would be beneficial for most land. Meanwhile, on the other side, Horusha still wanted to get rid of Ingale. They could attack from the sea and launch a campaign from the south, which would probably decimate them. So now that this was ready, they prepared for round 2. They decided to split one of their armies into 3, and this would be beneficial as it allowed them to cover more land. So they were ready for round 2. As the smaller armies sailed up north, it was a much more successful campaign because most of the Ingale troops defending the area were underprepared. You missed. And they had successfully made landings as the campaign from the south continued. One of the smaller armies helped hold off a bigger army, and though they were clearly outnumbered, it would still be enough time for Ingale to be captured. One of the bigger armies helped defend from a potential stop of capturing Ingale. And it was pretty successful as one of the smaller armies went, threatening to completely destroy them now that they had their capital. Ingale had no other choice. They had to surrender. This was a great success for Horusha, as now they controlled pretty much the rest of their side, yet there's still a precedented threat that they did not like. Now this is Ingale. Ingale is territory claimed by Plaint. They claimed it because it was naturally resource rich, and Horusha kind of wanted those resources and won them off the side, because not only would it give them resources, but an advantageous point to attack. So they prepared their troops, and when they were ready, they were declared war. Now Plaint was outnumbered here. And while it seemed like in the north they were going to attack down south, they were secretly going to march around. Managing to successfully do that, they completely flanked Plaint and absolutely destroyed the army to the north. and they were forced to surrender. Now, with the rest of Plain forces surrounded, it seemed like this was going to be an easy and fast victory. Yet there was still a problem, considering the fact that even though they had pretty much were going to destroy them, Ilignite was allies with Plain. So Ilignite, of course, came to the rescue. But there's also another thing that stopped the troops in the north advancing. Allow me to demonstrate. Now that we have the ridge, we can move across it. Plain had managed to successfully destroy the bridge that helped cross to their troops, which stopped the army from the north from flanking them. And down in the south, Ilignite had successfully made landings and forced Horsha armies to retreat back and attempt to push Ilignite back. At the Battle of Varnish, it was intense, with probably the most casualties in all of the battles that would be to come, and of what have already happened, because there were so many armies fighting in it. And after the battle, despite the fact that Ilignite lost, the casualties were greater in Horsha's sides. So despite the fact they lost, they had to retreat, which allowed Ilignite to set up defensive positions to the south of them. But despite that, Ingale hadn't completely fell, but they now lost the northern part. The bright side is that was not as the much resource-rich area, but it was still a decent amount of loss in territory. Bombing would continue over these two areas in an attempt to force them out, yet they held strong. Other artillery strikes and airstrikes would come, but it wasn't really doing anything. With all sides stuck in a stalemate, there would have to be something to break the stalemate, yet no one really knew what would happen. As well, there was an attempted landing on the other side of the island, but Horsha was ready for them there and managed to successfully defend the flank. So now they were stuck in, yet again, another stalemate, with no one to really break it, but who would be the one to attempt it first? Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it, and I've been waiting to get the part 2 of the Island Wars back out. Anyway, I'll see you guys next video, and watch out for Island Wars Part 3, the finale.